Welcome to When River Stones Sing of Quiet Dreams, a deeply soothing fantasy sleep story crafted to gently guide you into a state of peace and rest. If this journey into tranquility resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more calming content like this. Before we travel to the serene banks of the Somnolent River, we will begin with a short, gentle breathing guidance to help settle your mind and relax your body. If you wish to drift directly into the story, you can find timestamps for each chapter conveniently located in the description below. Please take a moment now to find a truly comfortable position. Allow your body to feel fully supported, perhaps noticing the gentle pressure where you rest against your bed or chair. Feel the softness of your blankets, the support of your pillow. Let yourself sink into this comfort, giving yourself permission to release the day. This time is purely for you, an invitation to welcome stillness and ease. Let the quiet atmosphere of the Somnolent River begin to seep into your awareness, preparing you for a journey into deep relaxation. Let us now take a slow, calming breath together. Inhale gently through your nose, feeling the cool air fill your lungs easily without effort. Then exhale softly through your mouth, perhaps with a quiet sigh, releasing the breath fully. With each gentle cycle of breath, imagine your body becoming a little softer, a little heavier. Feel any tightness in your shoulders begin to ease, your jaw relaxing. Picture the smooth, cool river stones resting peacefully on the mossy bank, bathed in soft twilight, and let that image bring a sense of calm to your mind. If thoughts from the day drift into your awareness, simply acknowledge them without judgment, like leaves floating gently down the Somnolent River, and then gently guide your attention back to the rhythm of your breathing or the sound of my voice. There is absolutely nothing you need to do right now except rest and listen. Feel the slow, steady pulse of the quiet river, letting its peaceful cadence carry away any lingering tension or worry. Allow yourself to become attuned to this gentle rhythm. Now let us begin our journey to the banks of the Somnolent River, where the quiet dreams held within ancient stones await to lull you into a peaceful and restorative sleep. Chapter 1. Arrival at the Somnolent River. The path had wound through landscapes increasingly hushed, the boisterous greens of sunlit meadows giving way to the deeper, shadowed hues of ancient woods, until finally it opened onto a scene bathed in the soft and ambiguous light of perpetual twilight. This, Corin knew, must be the place whispered of in travelers' tales, the banks of the Somnolent River. A profound stillness hung in the air, thicker and more comforting than any blanket. It was a quietude that seemed to absorb sound, muffling the memory of the world left behind. The air itself felt different here, cool and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth, like freshly turned soil after a gentle rain, mingled with the unique, slightly metallic smell of slow-moving water and the pervasive, velvety aroma of deep, green moss. Corin stood for a long moment, simply breathing it in. The weariness that had clung for so long, a heavy cloak woven from sleepless nights and anxious thoughts, felt infinitesimally lighter here, as if the very atmosphere discouraged its presence. The journey had been long, the reason for it a persistent, quiet ache in the heart that defied easy naming. All Corin truly sought was rest, a deep, untroubled stillness that felt increasingly elusive in the wider world. Here, perhaps, it could be found. The river itself was wide and dark, its surface like polished obsidian, reflecting the soft gray lavender sky. It moved with an incredible slowness, less a flow and more a gentle, inexorable creep, its edges softened by banks thick with moss that seemed to swallow the shoreline. Finding a spot beneath the drooping branches of an ancient willow whose leaves hung like silent green fingers, Corin sank down onto the mossy bank. The ground yielded softly, cool and damp beneath seeking hands, a grounding sensation that seemed to draw some of the frantic energy from tired limbs. Corin leaned back against the smooth, cool bark of the willow trunk, feeling its ancient solidity, a silent reassurance. Closing weary eyes, Corin focused intently on the sensory details of this sanctuary. The near silence was the most striking feature. There was no bustling wind, no bird song nearby, only the faintest, almost subliminal shush of the water against the mossy edge, a sound so soft it felt more like the memory of water than water itself. Far in the distance, muffled and gentle, came the occasional hoot of an owl, a sound that only seemed to deepen the surrounding peace. The coolness of the air was a balm on tired skin. Corin consciously relaxed the muscles in their shoulders, feeling them drop slightly, releasing a tension held for miles. A long, slow breath was drawn in, filling the lungs with the scent of river and earth, and exhaled even more slowly, a deliberate letting go. Another breath, just as slow, just as gentle. The simple act of sitting, of breathing, of being in this profoundly quiet place began to work its subtle magic. The frantic buzz in the mind started to subside, replaced by a growing awareness of the physical self, the feeling of the cool moss, the support of the tree, the gentle rise and fall of the chest with each breath. Dusk wasn't so much falling here as it was simply deepening the existing twilight. The soft lavender and rose hues in the sky overhead seemed to saturate, bleeding into the gray, creating a canopy of muted color reflected dreamily in the river's dark mirror. No harsh shadows existed here, only soft gradations of light and dark, contributing to the feeling of being gently cocooned. Corin watched a single willow leaf detach itself soundlessly and drift onto the water's surface, floating with impossible slowness downstream, an emblem of the pace of life beside the Somnolent River. There was no need to strive here, no need to push or achieve. The only requirement was surrender. Surrender to the quiet, to the stillness, to the gentle invitation to rest. Corin pulled a worn travel cloak tighter, the familiar weight and texture a small comfort in this new place. The weariness was still present, a deep ache in the bones, but it felt different now, less agitated, more like the pleasant tiredness after gentle exertion rather than the frayed exhaustion of worry. Leaning further back against the willow, Corin let their eyes drift half-closed. The soft sounds, the cool air, the feeling of the earth beneath it, all combined into a lullaby for the senses. The river flowed on, carrying its silent secrets. The owl hooted its distant, gentle note, and on the banks beneath the ancient willow, a weary traveler began, finally, to feel the first tentative tendrils of peace take root in the quiet soil of the soul. The day, with its forgotten miles and unspoken burdens, began to recede, leaving only the soft twilight and the promise of rest. Corin simply sat, letting the profound quietude of the place seep in, content for now just to be still. Chapter 2. Aster's Welcome. As the soft colors of twilight deepened, bleeding into one another like watercolors on damp paper, Corin remained nestled against the willow, simply observing. The world seemed to hold its breath here. The air grew cooler, carrying a hint of sweetness, the elusive fragrance of the pale night-blooming flowers hidden amongst the moss, opening their petals only to this gentle dimness. It was a scent that spoke of quiet secrets and peaceful dreams. The river's surface, impossibly still, reflected the sky perfectly, a mirror of muted lavender, rose, and deepening gray, disturbed only by the occasional slow ripples spreading outwards from an unseen source. It was in this profound stillness that Corin first noticed Aster. There was no sudden appearance, no sound of approach. It was more as if Corin's eyes adjusted to the dim light and simply found Aster there, moving along the water's edge with a slow, rhythmic grace that seemed perfectly attuned to the river's own languid pace. Aster's form was indistinct in the twilight, clad in simple, earth-toned fabrics that blended seamlessly with the surroundings. Their movements were deliberate and gentle, pausing occasionally to gaze at the water or touch a drooping willow branch with quiet reverence. There was an aura of deep calm about them, as intrinsic as the stillness of the air. Corin felt no alarm, only a mild curiosity. Aster eventually turned their gaze towards Corin, not with a start, but with a slow, unsurprised acknowledgement, as if they had been aware of Corin's presence all along. Aster approached slowly, feet making no sound on the thick moss, and stopped a respectful distance away. Their face, visible now in the soft light, was serene, etched with the gentle lines of time and quiet contemplation. A soft, welcoming smile touched their lips. "Welcome to the Somnolent River." Aster's voice was low and soft, melodic, seeming to blend with the quiet sounds of the place rather than disturb them. "It is a place for resting." Corin simply nodded. Finding words felt intrusive in the pervasive quiet. Aster seemed to understand this, sinking down onto the moss nearby with the same unhurried grace, settling into stillness as easily as a stone settles on the riverbed. For a comfortable while, they sat in shared silence, simply observing the deepening twilight, listening to the gentle shush of the water. It wasn't an awkward silence, but a companionable one, held within the larger peace of the riverbank. Eventually, Aster spoke again, their voice soft as moss. "The river holds many gifts for those who are weary. Its greatest treasure lies beneath the water, in the stones." Aster gestured towards the river's edge, where countless smooth, dark shapes lay nestled amongst the moss and silt. "These are dreaming stones. They have listened to the river's song and the earth's quiet thoughts for longer than memory can measure." Aster rose slowly and beckoned Corin to follow, moving towards the water. Kneeling carefully on the damp bank, Aster gently dipped a hand into the cool, clear water, swirling it slightly. "One does not choose a dreaming stone with the eyes," Aster explained softly. "You must let your hand find the one that feels right. Cool, smooth, comforting." Following Aster's lead, Corin knelt beside them, the damp coolness of the moss seeping slightly through worn trousers, a grounding sensation. Hesitantly, Corin dipped a hand into the surprisingly cool water. It felt clean and silky against the skin. Closing their eyes, Corin let their fingers drift amongst the smooth stones on the riverbed, feeling their varied shapes and textures. Some were flat and wide, others perfectly round, some slightly rougher than others. Then, one particular stone seemed to fit perfectly into the curve of Corin's palm. It was oval, utterly smooth, and felt noticeably cooler than the surrounding water. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible density to it, a feeling of substance. Drawing the hand back, Corin opened their eyes to look at the stone resting in their palm. It was a deep, lusterless gray, almost black, worn perfectly smooth by centuries of the river's slow caress. It felt cool and solid, a small anchor of stillness. Aster nodded gently, a look of quiet approval in their eyes. "Hold it," Aster whispered. "Be still and simply feel." Corin cradled the stone in both hands, focusing on its coolness, its satisfying weight, its perfect smoothness. Sitting back on the mossy bank, Corin closed their eyes again, holding the stone gently. At first, there was only the coolness and the weight. Then slowly, faintly, something else began. It wasn't quite a sound, more a feeling, a subtle vibration starting deep within the stone and resonating outwards into Corin's palms. It was incredibly low, a gentle hum, like the distant purring of some large, contented creature, or the lowest note of a cello played miles away. It was barely perceptible, yet undeniable. Corin held their breath, concentrating, feeling the gentle thrumming against the skin. It was a peaceful sensation, rhythmic and steady like a quiet heartbeat. A spark of quiet wonder ignited within Corin's weariness. The legends were true. The river stones did indeed sing, offering a lullaby not for the ears, but for the soul itself. Chapter 3. Learning the River's Song. The days that followed unfolded with the same unhurried grace as the somnolent river itself. Corin fell into a gentle rhythm, guided by Aster's quiet presence and the profound tranquility of the place. There were no schedules, no demands, only the slow passage of perpetual twilight and the deepening exploration of the dreaming stones. Time seemed to lose its sharp edges here, measured not in hours but in the slow shifting of muted light across the water and the gradual deepening of inner peace. Each period of wakefulness for sleep came more easily now. Deep and dreamless beside the murmuring river began with sitting quietly by the water's edge. Aster would often be nearby, perhaps tending to the small patch of hardy riverbank flowers, or simply gazing into the slow current, embodying the stillness Corin sought. Aster's guidance was subtle, offered in soft tones, never instructive, merely suggestive. "Let the stone rest in your hand," Aster might murmur, Feel its weight, its coolness. Let your attention settle there like dust settling in a quiet room. Corin learned to select different stones each time, discovering the subtle variations in their songs. Some stones, often the darker, heavier ones, emitted a deep, resonant hum, a vibration felt more in the bones and chest, grounding and profoundly calming. Others, usually smoother and lighter in color, offered a higher, clearer vibration, like the faint ringing of tiny, distant bells or wind chimes stirred by the softest breeze. This sound felt lighter, seeming to clear the mind, dissolving restless thoughts like mist in gentle sunlight. Corin began to favor the deeper humming stones, their steady thrum a comforting anchor. The act of listening became a practice in itself. It required a letting go of effort, a gentle receptivity. Corin would sit comfortably on the softest patch of moss, cradling a chosen stone, feeling its smooth surface against the skin. Closing their eyes helped focus the attention inwards. Initially, the mind would still wander, latching onto old worries or future uncertainties. But Aster's gentle voice would drift over. Thoughts may come and go like leaves on the river. Let them pass. Gently bring your awareness back to the feeling of the stone in your hand, back to the quiet vibration. Slowly, patiently, Corin learned to sustain focus on the stone's gentle song. The vibration, once barely perceptible, became clearer, more defined. Corin noticed how it seemed to seep into the hands, a subtle energy flowing up the arms. It wasn't forceful, but persuasive, like a gentle invitation to relax. Corin consciously focused on the muscles in their hands and forearms, noticing any tension, and then breathing out slowly. Imagine that tension dissolving, flowing away, carried off by the stone's soft hum. A pleasant warmth often followed the path of the vibration, spreading slowly through the limbs. It felt like sinking into a warm bath or being wrapped in a soft, heavy blanket. The coolness of the stone itself remained a point of focus, while the gentle warmth radiated outwards, relaxing muscles Corin hadn't even realized were tense. Shoulders would drop further, the space between the eyebrows would smooth out, the jaw would slacken. The feeling of sinking gently into the supportive moss beneath became more profound, a sense of being held securely by the earth. Aster sometimes shared observations about the stones, their voices barely disturbing the quiet air. This one, Aster might say, holding up a smooth gray stone, sings of the deep earth, of roots growing slowly in the dark, or indicating a paler, flatter stone. This one remembers the feeling of moonlight on still water. These weren't explanations, but poetic invitations to feel deeper, to connect with the stone's ancient memory. Corin spent long stretches simply sitting, holding a stone, breathing slowly, feeling the vibrations work their quiet magic. The constant soft swoosh of the river provided a soothing backdrop, a gentle rhythm that underscored the stone's inner song. The air remained cool and still, scented with moss and water. Sometimes Corin would drift into a light, peaceful state, hovering between wakefulness and sleep, utterly relaxed, the stone's hum a steady lullaby. In these moments, the weary knots within seemed to gently loosen, one by one, eased by the patient, quiet song of the river stones. Chapter 4. Echoes in Stone. As Corin grew more attuned to the subtle language of the dreaming stones, something shifted. Beyond the simple physical sensation of the vibration, faint impressions began to surface in the quiet spaces of the mind. They weren't clear pictures or distinct thoughts, but rather fleeting sensory echoes, like half-remembered dreams upon waking. Holding a particularly dark, smooth stone, Corin might suddenly feel a profound sense of stillness, accompanied by the cool, damp scent of deep earth and the imagined sensation of roots extending slowly, patiently downwards into darkness. It was the feeling of ancient, unhurried growth, of stability rooted deep below the surface. Another stone, paler and slightly flattened, might evoke the feeling of soft, cool moonlight dappling through leaves onto still water, accompanied by the gentle rustling sound of a night breeze and the crisp scent of cool night air. Holding a stone warmed slightly by being held for a while, Corin once perceived a fleeting sensation of warm sunlight filtering through a thick canopy, dappling onto soft moss below, bringing with it the scent of pine needles and dry leaves and the drowsy buzzing of unseen insects. These were the quiet dreams Aster had spoken of, echoes of the land's experience, absorbed and held timelessly within the stones. These sensory whispers were incredibly gentle, never jarring or demanding attention. They arose naturally from the state of deep relaxation fostered by the stone's vibration and the river's tranquil aura. Experiencing them brought not confusion, but a profound sense of connection. It felt as though the boundaries between Corin and the natural world were softening, blurring gently at the edges. The weariness Corin carried felt less like a personal burden and more like a shared state, part of the natural cycle of effort and rest, like the trees shedding leaves in autumn or the river slowing in the dry season. This perspective brought a quiet acceptance, a lessening of the internal struggle against tiredness. Aster seemed to understand this unfolding connection, offering quiet smiles of encouragement. They spent peaceful hours together tending a small patch of riverbank, flowers hardy, pale blossoms that thrived in the perpetual twilight. Their hands moved slowly, companionably through the cool, dark soil, removing stray weeds, loosening the earth around the roots. The physical contact with the soil was grounding, the simple, purposeful movements deeply calming. Feeling the texture of the earth, smelling its rich scent, seeing the delicate resilience of the flowers, it was another form of listening, another way of connecting to the quiet life force of the place. During these shared, quiet activities, Aster might occasionally share a fragment of river lore, speaking of how the stones gathered memories like silt, how the willows whispered secrets to the water, how the very air held the breath of centuries. These weren't grand pronouncements, but soft observations offered like found treasures. They deepened Corin's appreciation for the subtle magic woven into the fabric of the Somnolent River's banks. One afternoon, while holding a particularly resonant stone, Corin felt a wave of simple contentment wash over them, a feeling unrelated to any specific thought or memory, just a pure sense of quiet well-being, like a perfectly calm pool of water reflecting a clear sky. It was the feeling of being exactly where one needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done, which, in this case, was simply being still and listening. The stone in Corin's hand felt like a conduit, not just to the land's dreams, but to a core of stillness within Corin's own self, a place untouched by weariness or worry. The practice continued selecting a stone, settling onto the soft moss, feeling the coolness, the weight, the gentle hum, breathing slowly, sinking deeper, allowing the subtle vibrations to dissolve tension, inviting the quiet echoes of the land to surface gently, tending the flowers, feeling the earth, sharing comfortable silence with Aster, each element wove together, creating a tapestry of profound peace. The frayed edges of Corin's spirit were not being forcefully repaired, but gently smoothed, coaxed back into alignment by the patient rhythms of the river and the ancient quiet songs held within its stones. Chapter 5. A Pocketful of Quiet. There came a time, not marked by any clock or calendar, but by a shift in the inner landscape, when Corin knew the period of deep rest beside the Somnolent River was drawing to a natural close. The profound weariness that had driven the journey here hadn't vanished entirely. Perhaps such deep tiredness never fully disappears, but it had transformed. It was no longer a jagged ache, an anxious buzz, but a soft, quiet presence, like the gentle weight of a comfortable blanket. It felt manageable, accepted. In its place, a deep reservoir of calm had settled within, stable and quiet as the river's own depths. The restless searching that had characterized Corin's mind upon arrival had stilled. The frantic need for something, for escape or cure, had dissolved in the river's gentle aura. The practice of listening to the stones, of sinking into stillness, had become ingrained, a quiet skill learned not through effort, but through patient surrender. Corin now understood that the peace found here wasn't solely dependent on the location, but on the inner state cultivated beside the water. One cool twilight morning, Corin found Aster sitting by the water's edge, gazing into the slow current. Aster looked up as Corin approached, their serene eyes holding a quiet understanding. No words were needed to convey Corin's intention to move on. Aster simply nodded, a gentle acknowledgement of the journey's next phase. "The river's song stays with you," Aster murmured softly, "once you have truly learned to listen." Aster then reached down to the water's edge, hand moving with familiar grace amongst the smooth shapes. After a moment, they selected a stone one Corin recognized. It was a deep gray, almost black, perfectly smooth and cool to the touch. The very first stone Corin had held, the one whose deep, resonant hum had felt so profoundly grounding. Aster held it out. A reminder, Aster said simply, of the quiet place within. Corin accepted the stone, its familiar weight settling comfortingly in the palm. It felt cool against the skin, and even without conscious effort, Corin could perceive its faint, steady vibration, a low, peaceful thrum. It was like holding a tangible piece of the river's tranquility, a pocketful of quiet to carry forward. Corin closed their fingers around it, feeling its smooth, solid presence. "Thank you," Corin whispered, the words feeling inadequate but sincere. Their farewell was as quiet and unhurried as everything else beside the Somnolent River. There were no grand pronouncements or promises to return, only a shared look of gratitude and understanding. Corin gathered the few belongings, the worn cloak feeling lighter now, less like a burden and more like simple protection. The dreaming stone was carefully tucked into a soft pouch, its gentle weight a comforting presence. Standing one last time on the mossy bank, Corin took a slow, deep breath of the cool, damp air, imprinting the scent, the sound, the feeling of this place onto memory. The soft shush of the river, the drooping willows, the perpetual twilight, the profound stillness, it was all part of the gift received here. Turning away from the water felt not like leaving peace behind, but like carrying it forward, integrated and accessible. As Corin walked back along the hushed path leading away from the river, the sounds of the outer world gradually began to filter back in the distant call of a different bird, the rustle of drier leaves underfoot. Yet the inner quiet remained. Corin could feel the gentle weight of the stone in the pouch, a physical anchor to the practice learned. The journey ahead was unknown, but Corin faced it not with the frantic energy of before, but with a quiet resilience, a newfound ability to access the stillness within, thanks to the time spent listening to the river stone sing of quiet dreams. The river flowed on behind, holding its secrets, its peace eternally available to those who sought it with a quiet heart.